welcome into another episode of the Pitcher Perfect podcast. I am your host, Kat Osterman, and my co-host, Holly Pierce. We have been a little busy with the holidays. Obviously, fall season wrapped up, Thanksgiving, Christmas break. Both of us have been doing a lot of traveling, a lot of working clinics, and we're going to come to you today talking a little bit about what we saw at our respective clinics. Holly got invited to Pitching Angel with Amanda Scarborough, who was our very first guest ever on this podcast, so you can go back a ways and find her episode. But Holly got to work Pitching Angel, and then we had an academy pitching development clinic for the Bombers. And so Brooke Vessel, who is also another guest of ours, we worked that and ran that for our academy pitchers. And so while it was a fun break, we went to Disney. Holly, you kind of did a little bit of everything, but I took the little one to Disney, had fun there, and then came home, and after Christmas got right back to work. So Holly, you talk about Pitching Angel a little bit.
Yeah, Pitching Angel was my second year working Pitching Angel, second year in a row. Fantastic experience, such good energy. My daughter actually got to be a participant at Rising Pitching Angel, which was the second session for the littles. Fantastic for her. I saw so much growth in those 2 days with all the drills and whatnot. It's just good energy, just good people. I think Amanda's done a really good job of building a culture where, everybody's really on the same page of creating a really fun environment, very upbeat. I was blessed actually to be able to kind of have free reign on my stations. I was with the advanced group. So, I talked to Amanda a little bit before about what my thoughts were. We collabed a little bit so that they were consistent with the theme of the day. And my range stations the first day. So all the other stations, there was like 120 in the advanced group, 120 pitchers. So there was 10 per group, 12 stations, I believe. The other ones were pretty much mostly all like, mechanical drill work. The range station was different because what we do at the range obviously is a lot of game IQ type stuff. So we tailored that range station around game IQ. And the first day I was paired up, I had two helpers with me. They were fantastic. Megan Gregory, pitcher at Indiana, and SJ Guerin, who we have talked about on this podcast before. She's a pitcher at Auburn. And both of them are kind of like specialty type pitchers. If you ever get a chance to watch either of them throw, they know how to set batters up and put them away and really offset their pitches. And that was what our station theme was. So I was blessed to have them as helpers because they gave great feedback and it was really tailored to what their strengths are. We talked individually with each pitcher. What's your setup? What's your go-to? Well, I found really early on that a lot of the girls, they didn't know what their setup pitch was. But beyond that, a lot of them actually didn't really know what their go-to pitch was. They didn't know what their put 'em away pitch was. And so we kind of dove into that. I prefaced it with, for the girls that were kind of like, I have no idea. I said, okay, so you've got bases loaded, full count, high pressure situation. What does your gut tell you want to throw? What would you throw to get this batter out in the biggest of situations? That's probably what your go-to pitch is. And so we started there. That was our starting point. And then we talked about what helps set that up. So if they had no idea, then we kind of talked a little bit about what certain pitches do when they're set up with one another, disrupting either timing, disrupting eye level, or moving batters off, changing heart rate, and then going slow and away, those kinds of things. How one pitch plays off the other. And then we help them find what their setup and their put 'em out pitch was, and we work 2 pitch sequences. So that was the first day of advanced. The second day of advanced, I was paired with Aaliyah Binford, who she's a Volt now with you.
Yes,
So super excited for that. But she, is an off-speed specialist. She throws all of her pitches 3 speeds. So we decided to tailor that to finding that middle speed. And for a lot of girls, they didn't even know what that was. They didn't know it was possible. We adjusted their grip a little bit and had them just do it and dive right into it. And the looks on their faces, it was priceless. After they threw their first one and it actually worked, we're like, okay, you're just going to change your grip a little bit. Don't change anything else. We're just going to throw your hard stuff with a little bit different grip. And the looks on their faces were like absolute shock that they actually executed it really within like an 8-minute, 10-minute station. But it was teaching them, really handing them over tools that they can use to get batters out. And It was great. So much good feedback. Just putting it out there, but a lot of the girls said it was their favorite station. So both of them, because I think it just got them really thinking the game in ways that most of them, I don't think, had thought the game before. Yeah. So we'll get into that a little bit in terms of the game IQ piece and how I want to go a little deeper into, where I think that may be lacking a bit in our game, especially at the younger levels. But did you see anything similar, or what did you see in your Bomber Academy?
Yeah, similar. We have a junior academy this year. So we had 10U and then 12U, 14, 16, 18U. Some of our older girls didn't come, like the ones that play for me. One of them's from Oklahoma, so she was, she shuts down as soon as fall travel ball's over because she had just played high school too, and I was like, that's fine. Another one takes off December because she ramps up for January for high school to start. So not as many high schoolers, but I did like that we got to work with that like sweet spot of 14, 16, where they're still kind of learning themselves, but similar kind of in you talking about your two pitch station is I did a presentation. So our first day we did just a classroom session and Brooke and I just talked to them. And I did a segment on being able to know yourself. And I challenged them. I said, what is your best pitch? And they all kind of looked at me. I said, and if you don't know, how do you define best pitch? And you and I were talking about this off air before we got on to record today, is people ask me that all the time. And I'm like, well, it depends on how you define best pitch. If you're going to say my best pitch is the one that moves, that makes hitters look the silliest, my drop ball is great. It moves a lot. It gets a lot of swing and misses. It's my out pitch. If you're talking about my best pitch being what I can control in the zone, what I can control out of the zone, high percentage strikes, it's going to be my curveball because I can throw it both sides of the plate and I can throw it off speed, but I can throw it on the plate and know it's still probably not getting barreled up. And then if you're going to talk Rapsodo numbers, my rise ball is going to be the one. So it's like, where do you define best pitch? And the second one is where I go off of, especially with our younger athletes. What can you throw for a strike? How well can you control it? Can you throw it at a good speed? If you can throw it at a second speed, that's great. But a lot of times when they're young, like you said, they couldn't. They hadn't worked on throwing a third speed, right? It's either hard or change. But if I'm 14U and I can throw my screwball on the corner and too far inside, or if it's a curveball that I can throw on the corner and I can take off the plate, but I know I hit that, 65 to 80% of the time at like 14U, that's probably your best pitch. But it was crazy to me because then we made each pitcher go around and say what their best pitch is. And how many listed 2 or 3? I'm like, that's not your best pitch. What is your best pitch? And it goes back to kind of our conversation on mastering things. What is the pitch when in doubt? Like you said, bases loaded, 2 outs. You need to get this person out. What are you throwing full count? Like, regardless of how we've set it up, what is the pitch in your gut that you say, this is what I'm throwing, right? Now, when I'm older at like, college level and even pro level, it might be for me a curve or a drop. Probably still not my rise in a full count, but I may have 2 at that age. But at 14, you don't have 2. One of those needs to be mastered to where you're like, it's this pitch. And I still think even in college, most people, what is Nyjah Kennedy throwing in those situations? A rise ball. Let's be real. Tegan Cavan, probably a rise ball. If Taryn Moa was still throwing, probably a changeup.
Mm-hmm.
There's people that are known for that pitch because they mastered it. That is their best pitch. And so day one, I think that was kind of the mind blowing was we couldn't say a best pitch. We still had to list 2 or 3. And I was like, no, go back and pick one. And then the other thing that was kind of eye-opening to them that I liked was Brooke and I talked about having a pitch versus like what pitches do you have and what pitches do you throw? And it goes still along the lines of mastering. What is something you've kind of mastered and what are you trying to throw? And we had one older pitcher that she's like, I throw, and I don't remember what they all were, but I think it was like drop, curve, and screw maybe. And I have those, but I throw a rise and a changeup. And I asked her, I said, why do you just throw a changeup? She goes, it's like 50-50 at best. And I'm like, perfect. That's the example. Like you won't ever say, I don't throw a changeup, but you also don't say, oh, changeup's one of my best pitches. And so getting them to think along those lines because they think just because they throw it or because someone taught it that they automatically have it. And I'm like, you don't automatically have it for a pitching coach to call in that situation. And so that was eye-opening. And then I think once we got to throwing, it was more kind of just body control and understanding how our body can make pitches, do different things and how they don't think about that. Like if I rush to my front foot, now my weight's forward, my body is slid, my arm's farther back. So yes, I'm probably going to release early, and it's either going to go arm side run or to the ground. Or if you
Yeah.
hold on to it, we already know the problem, right? But just understanding that like it's not just the arm. And I know we've gotten into internal rotation before, but I was talking to so many of them. I'm like, go watch the best pitchers. They do not just throw their forearm over. You have got to manipulate this wrist. And I think what some of them don't realize is because they're not understanding what their wrist and fingers are supposed to do on all these pitches, we then find they think they're throwing a rise ball, and they're throwing a rise ball with downspin. They're throwing a curveball that's really has downspin.
What does a rise ball with downspin really end up doing or looking like?
Right. It's a high fastball, right? But
Yeah.
they think they're getting under it. And because they angle, well, that's a rise ball. Because we put them all on Rapsodo and got some spin numbers and whatnot. Of course, lovely technology never works the way we want it to. So, but we adapted and we got everyone 12U and up on it. But it's really interesting when you show them, like, here's what it's saying. You're not really getting under it. So where can you break it down to where you feel your fingers and your wrist get under, because this whole forearm just going isn't getting it under for you. So it was interesting because I think a lot of pitchers maybe kind of, I don't want to say got a wake up call, but just eye opening, and that their spins aren't really doing what they want them to do. And then I think the other piece to me is just watching some pitchers warm up, and you and I have talked about this. Like if you're not in the position to pitch, like if you're my catcher, Holly, right now, I'm never going to be straight on at you like this. So why would I do my spins straight on at you? Or if I'm doing K drill, why would I do it while I'm having a conversation? I'm not paying attention to stepping straight, resisting on my front side, and everything's kind of just like flailing everywhere. That's
Yeah.
not helping us either. So, I think sometimes intentfulness is something they don't think.
I think, and correct me if you disagree with this, but I think a lot of that goes back to pitchers not really understanding the why. So, they do certain drills because they've either seen it or a pitching coach has told them to do it. And when you're talking about, like, well, why would we be doing it that way? Like, if we're not going to be pitching that way, I don't think that they can answer that question either. It's just, I don't know. That's what somebody told me to do. So I would say, for pitchers, well, for pitching coaches out there, have a reason why and communicate those things with your pitchers. And for pitchers out there or parents, like ask questions. Ask, why am I doing, like, how is this benefiting me? Why am I doing this? But really understanding the why. And if something doesn't make sense for you, like, don't do it. I mean, it's just, we're really big on, I've mentioned this before with firecrackers, like we don't hit balls before games. It works for us. Like, but there's a why behind it. Like if you were to ask Tony why, like he has a reason why. The girls understand the why. It's what works for us personally. If there was a point where it didn't work, I think he would probably change things up. But it's always about, it's not just doing something, because that's what you got to understand what the purpose is. I think at every age, it like really getting them to understand their bodies and what the reason for certain things are. I don't know. What do you think about that?
No, I think that's exactly it. Like I tell them all the time, two things. One, if you don't understand it, like you said, ask why. That's not disrespectful, because you have to be your own pitching coach to a certain extent in a game, because a pitching coach can't call time every 5 pitches and come help fix you, right? So you have to know if this ball goes short, why. Now some pitching coaches will tell you right away, and then like when mine get older, I wait to see if they can tell me first. Or I'll ask them, what did you feel? What do you think went wrong? And sometimes they're like, I don't know. I didn't really feel anything. I thought it was good, but then it wasn't. What did you see? And I'll be like, okay, throw another one and let's see what happens. Because we don't, I think we also get in the habit of correcting every single pitch, and we don't have
Yes, pet peeve.
like
Absolutely,
throw
that's a pet
3 or
peeve of mine.
4. And if you don't something wrong on pitch 1 and you still do the same thing wrong on pitch 3, okay, I'm going to say something, because you are seeing a result and not changing it. But you have to ask why to know what the drill is supposed to help. So I say that it's not disrespectful to ask why, to get clarification. As a parent, it's not disrespectful to say, hey, what is this drill supposed to do? What should the end result be long term? How should this help us, kind of thing? And then the second piece is, if you go, and now granted, game day, you don't get to watch pitchers warm up. So unless you're there, like on camera, on ESPN or whatever. But if you're watching them throw, and part of your mechanics, I don't want to say doesn't match, it doesn't have to be identical, but let's go to internal rotation. And I know I pick on this a lot, but tell me where there's a pitcher that doesn't worry about the snap, that just throws their arm over. There's not. I will say close to it, but she still snaps, like is Carlin Pickens, because she throws and she is very long, straight, a little more straight armed than most people, but she still doesn't just go blow straight into internal rotation. Because if you do, you can't manipulate a ball in the way
Right.
it's supposed to break. You can't manipulate horizontal break that way. You could probably throw a drop ball, but that's probably about it, which is why we see a lot of these downspin fastballs. But I think you have to know exactly what you're getting from each drill. And that's where, like, and I'm not saying don't go sit on the bucket and stand up and throw to like work on leg drive or whatever. No, yes, we don't sit on a bucket when we pitch, but when you stand up from the bucket, you're in the position to pitch.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's the like face on or these wonky things that like we get pitchers doing that I'm like, what are we teaching? Because yes, they can master this weird drill, but can they throw the ball to the catcher the way it's supposed to go? But I think that coupled with, our bless our hearts, like our 10Us, a couple of them were like, oh, I throw a curveball and a screwball and I'm like watching them. And one was like, can I throw a curveball? I'm like, you need to throw 10 strikes for me first.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because I was watching and balls like was one that three or four straight pitches were released too early. They did arm sign run, nowhere close to the poor catcher. And I'm like, you have to see that doesn't work. You have to do something different. And if you can't do that with a fastball at 10U, you don't need to be throwing anything that breaks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think the other piece is parents, like, make sure your kid wants to pitch. And I think that's, part of, don't just enroll them in a camp because of that caliber, because you want them to. Because the other piece is like the hardest throwing 10U kid we had couldn't control the ball to save her life. And so I'm like, yes, she throws hard. And maybe when she is around the zone, other people aren't hitting it yet. But is she really
Yeah.
trying to pitch, or are you putting her in there to throw? Because now she's going to be a thrower because she doesn't really want to do this, but you keep making her. And then in the long run, she's going to get to a point where either A, she hates it and quits, or B, she's getting people out, but she's just throwing and she's never learned how to properly do this.
Yeah.
Which
And I would say, I would say also to like the control piece, the, mastery piece. We talked about mastery like from the very beginning of this podcast. We've talked about it quite a lot, but I think that that's also connected going back to pitchers not really knowing what their strength is or what their get 'em out go to pitch is, or naming several rather than one because they haven't mastered one. So they don't have a bread and butter yet. Maybe, you
correct.
know what I mean? So it's like, that's the other thing, what we do in the range is like, we start every bullpen with you take your bread and butter and you do like 5 sets, 3 to 5 sets of five, where you're just like nailing 3 of 5 of your bread and butter. Everybody's going to be different, but maybe, and this is a question for pitchers out there, parents out there, do you not know what your kid or your bread and butter is, or feel like you don't have one yet because you haven't mastered one pitch? You're naming 3 pitches because you have 3 pretty comparable pitches. You have 3 maybe good ones, but what's your great one? If you don't have a great one, then it makes sense that you're not able to name a bread and butter because you've got 3 good ones and not one great one. That great one is what your bread and butter is. That's what your get 'em out pitch is. So it makes sense that you wouldn't know what that is if you don't have one yet because you haven't mastered it. And so that is either you haven't mastered something to the point where you can call it your bread and butter, your get 'em out pitch, or B, take what you feel is your best pitch and then put time into mastering it. If you feel like I naturally have an easy time like throwing a rise ball, I've got natural upspin or I've got natural downspin, or there's a certain pitch that stands out to you that you feel like this comes pretty naturally to me. Like, I think this is the kind I'm a ground ball pitcher. It's easier for me to throw down. Master it and make yourself a ground ball pitcher. That's the type of pitcher I am. I had gone around at each time the girls came through the station, one of the first things I asked them was, what kind of pitcher are you? And by what kind of pitcher are you, I mean, like, what do most of your outs look like? Like, most of your outs, what do they look like? For most of us, it's going to be pitch to contact. Some of us, high number of strikeouts, high number of swings and misses. But like when you get contact, what does your contact look like? And most of them could define, well, most of them are ground balls. I said, okay, so do you throw mostly down in the zone? They're like, yeah. I'm like, okay. So we're getting somewhere on figuring out what your bread and butter is. But it really is talking through that process, but also, again, I think that a big part of not knowing what your bread and butter is maybe you just haven't mastered one great pitch and you've got several good ones, but you gotta have at least one great pitch.
Right. Well, and the 12-year-olds or the 11-year-olds probably, they're probably first year that told me fastball. I'm like, amen. It's okay for a fastball to be your
Yes.
best pitch for a while. It's okay for it to be your best pitch forever. To be honest, we've already talked about that. Like, let's normalize being able to use and work off a fastball sometimes. But I think a lot of these, and it goes back to a lot of these athletes and their parents want to learn everything instead of master. And so instead of putting our foot down as pitching coaches and saying, no, we are going to hit this mile per hour at least at this age level, and we're going to have this percentage of control before we go to throw this. They just say, okay, let's teach them a screwball and let's teach them a curveball. And I'm like, why are we going to teach them a pitch that breaks out of the zone when the one that's supposed to go straight doesn't hit the target? Because then too, in my mind, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you think different, is if we master the fastball, let's say we can hit 7, 8, 9, 10 out of 10 on almost any occasion. That means you've mastered what your body's supposed to do. If you
Yes.
haven't mastered that, why are we throwing something that moves? Because this is supposed to stay consistent for the most part. The
Yes.
body adjustments for movement pitches are minimal because we're doing it with how we snap and spin.
Mhm.
And so I think we get lost. And I think parents, like, be able to speak up for your athlete. I mean, yes, I want your athlete to be able to speak for themselves too, but I think too many of them just do what they're told instead of trying to understand. And that was like the best answer I loved at talking to, I think at one of our breaks, I keep mentioning this one 10U kid, but she like asked a million questions, sat right in front of Brooke and I, took like 6 pages of notes. But I think it was at break and we were talking about pitching and I was like, you're taking a lot of notes. She's like, there's a lot to learn. Shows, and I think that's why I like pitching because there's just always something new to learn.
I love
And I was
that.
like, you know what, baby? Yes, because you're never going to be perfect. I said, even if you
Mhm.
throw what they call statistically a perfect game, I guarantee you it wasn't perfect. You got away with one down the middle. You
Yeah.
chucked one 5 feet over someone's head that they swung at. Something about it wasn't perfect. Or maybe you threw a fatty and it was a line drive and somebody caught it, right? I said, so there's always something to work on in learning. But I was like, at 10, I was like just laughing because she's like, there's just always something new to learn. And that's it.
Mhm.
But just because there's all these things to learn and ways to improve, make sure you have the foundation and a very strong one to be improving upon. Other than that, I mean, our bomber one was, we were a little bit limited on space as far as like throwing full pitch goes. But I think it's also too the other thing that always, I don't want to say shocks me, and I don't want to say frustrates me, although frustrates is kind of the better word, is when we try to do spins and when we can't do spins without moving our lower body. I had him in just an athletic position, let's get straight back, boom, come in and snap. And like, we want to use our hips, we want to throw. I'm like, this stays still.
Yeah.
We're going to snap this way. And just the realization you're 10 feet away, you're not going to see a curve, you're not going to see a drop, you're not going to see a right. We're trying to see the spin, like
Yes.
just a good spin.
Yeah.
I will say I think Brooke did a really good job. She talked about like spin direction, spin efficiency, like basically everything you read on technology
Yeah.
and getting them to understand like what the spin really should look like and how they're using their fingers and wrists to generate that. So that part was fun to watch because I don't think some of the like 12U first year 14U really understand why their pitches spin the way they do if it's not correct, and being able to kind of pinpoint that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, there was definitely a lot of good things. I met a lot of really good pitchers. I think with, they got so much good physical work, like great drills, like all that kind of stuff. I want to see pitchers in general, like as a whole, not just the camp, but as a whole, like there's so much good information out there on, the physical drills and all that kind of stuff. Make sure you're digesting the information, whether it's the information about the drill, the information you're watching a drill, understanding what it means, what it's supposed to do, and then how can you use that pitch? What next? Like what next with you're doing the physical work and you're building this great machine, but like how can you use it when the game's on the line? How do you use it to get batters out? There's so many of these other components. There's so much information out on the internet. Like, don't just educate yourself on watching drills and, replicating what you see other pitchers doing in drills on videos, but there's just this other layer of information out there that I think that there's just not enough of an importance placed on really educating and understanding the game, the drills, the body movements, just understanding in general beyond just being a robot and trying to get your body to look like what you think it's supposed to look like.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing is making sure that whatever drills you're doing and learning, and I say this at our camps all the time, like we do 3 basic drills that everybody can do. It like just helps everything. But there are drills meant for to fix a stride, or there are drills that are going to emphasize being back a little bit more. And if you're already back, you don't need to do that drill. So learn it at camp, but it doesn't mean you have to go home and do it every day. So making sure the drills you're learning and you're implementing into your daily practice are things you need to be working on. And again, this goes into, we did some body assessment stuff with them too. And, if you're front side dominant versus posterior chain, I'm posterior chain dominant. That helps pitching greatly because you're more centered. You're not leaning forward. I guarantee you, if we do a lot of pitchers, they're probably front side and like quad dominant.
Hmm.
But so if I need to do something to get you off your toes and more centered, if you're already posterior chain dominant, you don't need to do that drill. Like I
Right.
may have you do it once or twice if you get in the habit of being forward, but otherwise I may put you in a different spot. So I think, it's even when we teach pitching, because we'll always break down rise, curve, and drop. And I will tell a kid, work on the spins, but if you don't throw it, when we go back to throw it, go back to a fastball or a changeup or whatever other pitch you do throw, and let's work on that. And just make sure when I come over, you tell me, hey, I don't throw a curveball, so I'm working on my drop still. I
Yeah.
said, because I don't want to force you right now in a massive situation to have to throw a curveball, but you're sitting here listening to it. So you can pick up some things to know to take with you. And then you can begin to learn something if you would like. If not, you pocket it and come back to it when it's time for you.
Right.
So I think parents too, like, go to a clinic. If they talk about the curveball, talk with it with your 10-year-old. Hey, what'd they say? What was the grip? What's your body supposed to do? Remember it, but it doesn't mean you go start practicing it tomorrow if they're not ready. So
You just said something actually to rewind back because it connected with something Amanda said and something that we talked about in the range. But when you were talking about spins and when you're close, you're looking for the spin, not necessarily for it to go to a certain spot, right? Or move a certain way when you're super close. You're just looking at the spin. Amanda kind of said the same thing about, when you're working certain body movements, don't worry about where the ball's going. But we say the same thing in the range. Now, on the other side of that, when you're working location, don't overthink about your body. To me, that's another big thing is about drill work is compartmentalizing. So, if you're working a certain body movement, don't worry about where the ball's going so much. If you're just focused on like isolating a body movement, it for you when you were talking about the spin, like I said, when you're super close and you're just working on the way that the pitch is spinning, don't try and chuck it with your whole body and like try to get it to move to a certain spot when you're 10 feet away. And again, I'm repeating myself, but like if you're working sequences and location, focus on the chess match and the sequences and location. And don't try to obsess over the body movement piece. Like compartmentalize when you're whatever you're working on that day or working on in
right.
that drill, focus on that thing and that thing only. When
Yeah.
we overload where you're trying to think about all of these different things and put all these different components together and let that happen naturally. Build certain pieces with certain drills and then let it kind of all come together. But when you're working on that thing, think about that thing. Don't focus on too many things at once. I think that's the other thing with so much information out there. I think I see pictures overloading where they're trying to think about so much at once and you really got to break it down and just think about one thing at a time when you're working building up, your foundation.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's compartmentalizing, but also, like we just said, like understand what you're practicing, right? So I had one of my college kids came back and wanted to throw before she goes to school. So we threw yesterday, and it wasn't bad by any means. But she also hadn't been throwing a lot over break, went skiing, then went to Disney, and comes back and like had done long toss. And I'm like, okay, you can't expect to have timing. So I don't mind that you came to see me because there are things we can work on. But two, don't get frustrated that the curveball's not breaking like you want it to because you haven't been throwing. Like
Right.
you can't just pick up a ball after not throwing for a week and expect it to do what it did when you're in prime. There's a reason we throw so much to keep our
Yeah.
timing. So making sure then, like, what's the purpose of your practice? So know everything. Know the purpose of your spin, know the purpose of your snap, know the purpose of your drill, and then what's the purpose of your bullpen. I think
And I would
I loved how many pitchers were out working though. I know you guys had Pitching Angel. We had our bomber thing. I saw another one somewhere on Instagram or Facebook. A lot of people getting work in that post New Year's break, which is awesome. And I know obviously Gentro as catcher's going now with her retreat, but just seeing all the work, it's great. But just I think the big thing is making sure the clinics are great. I love them. I love doing them even most of the time because I love teaching, but it's a learning opportunity for you. It's not necessarily I have to go do this, but I learned these 8 drills, each one does this. Doesn't mean you do all 8 every day. You know, I tell mine all the time, I'm going to show you some things and we're going to try them for the 20 minutes that we're doing this drill or this spin or whatever. And after you leave this clinic, unless you come back to another clinic or you come to work for me or to play for me, I won't know if you ever do it again or not. So do it here, take it with you, or do it here. You don't like it. When you leave the room, I won't know. You dump it and keep going. So I think just making sure you're using these as learning experiences and things that can help you, but not necessarily everything has to be for you. And that's okay too. You know, I told the girls, my big thing was like, I had a pitching coach. I liked him. But occasionally my dad would be like, hey, we're going to go see this other guy or we're going to go see this girl. And okay. And it wasn't because we didn't like mine or he wasn't teaching me. It was, hey, maybe this guy has something you can do a little bit different that enhances your rise or helps your drop. Or maybe this guy can teach you a change up because you've lost it. Right. And then, you know, then the other piece is like one to, you know, maybe the terminology is just different and that clicks.
something clicks. Yeah.
Or maybe they have a drill that you really liked and now we want to add it to it. So
Yeah.
making sure you're getting what fits you best from every place that you get a chance to learn.
Yeah, I like to look at it like, it's a buffet of information. So whether that's a camp or clinic where you're getting to work with lots of people or you work with different pitching coaches. I used to drive 2 hours every other week or every week to see Don Sarno specifically just for spin. And then I also had like my other pitching coaches where I was working the other things. But you get a little bit from different people. Like other different people have certain things to offer. Now I think, consistency is good if you have somebody that you click with that is also not threatened by the fact that you're getting information from other places. So, willing to communicate and say like, what'd you learn with Dawn this week? And how can we implement it into what we're doing? But look at it like there's a lot of people out there with great information. It's a buffet. Take what fits, take what works for you, apply what works, leave what doesn't. But I think it's a good thing that there are a lot of good coaches and resources out there. And, I don't think you need to be overdoing it and doing 5 lessons a week. But like you
Right.
said, checking in every once in a while to see, hey, what can I learn from this person over here? I heard they're really good at, like you said, like teaching a rise ball, whatever. What can we get from them?
Yeah. No, I think that's the big thing is just as the 10-year-old said, there is so much to learn about pitching. So continue to learn it all and try to soak it in. But again, adapt what works for you in this moment, not everything all at once. I mean, it's, I think you talk to any pitcher and we learned things in a progression and not all the same, but I didn't learn a rise and a curve at the same time. I learned a rise and then I learned a curve and then I played with a drop and all of a sudden I had a good drop. Like I didn't even learn a drop to have a good one. I learned a drop just to have something that offset my best pitch at the time, which was a rise ball. So, and then my best pitch flipped. So it can happen. So I think the big thing is know who you are and where you're at, what you're working on, and then absorb whatever is put in front of you that help those things. And the other things, don't forget them. Just table them for later, and they'll come into play throughout your career.
Yeah. And with that, I want to also say thank you to several of our listeners who have come up and introduced themselves over break. I think I had like 3 people I got on camera. I got to post those of them talking about how this happens to be their favorite podcast. So just saying.
I had a few. I
Makes
had
us
a
feel
couple
good.
too. I think the best part for me is when parents say that, they listen to it with their daughter. So it's, their daughter, we know obviously pitchers want to learn, but I love when parents are learning alongside their daughter. So it's like, hey, both of them can say, hey, remember when, or remember what they said.
Yeah.
And I think, the other thing and the whole reason you and I started this was not for the physical piece, but the mindset piece. And someone did say, they were like, we just love how you guys talk about like the mindset you should have and things you should think about. And so, yeah, we love our listeners letting us know that you love it. And if there's anything you want us to talk about, situation specific, instance that maybe your daughter went through, whatever, we can always just say anonymous and talk about it. But shoot us any questions, any topics, all the things you guys want us to cover. We are going to get a little bit better at making sure we don't skip weeks. But
2026 goal.
yeah, let's try to get all maybe 52 weeks if we can do it ahead of time.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's give ourselves let's say 50. We can have 2 weeks off. But
Right.
yeah, we're going to, and hopefully we'll get some more guests on too. So, but let us know things you guys want to hear. I did talk to Holly. I think one thing we're going to try to do is kind of overview the college game, what went on in a week when college starts playing, obviously pitching performances. And so we're going to be excited to kind of delve into that a little bit this year too. So bring us all the things that you guys want to hear about, and happy 2026. Happy New Year. We are excited to be back with you guys, and we will see you guys next week.